Hello everybody, it's Chaz in Omaha, back with another build guide, and this time we're going to be looking at an Ignite Runemaster. So first and foremost, we're just going to go ahead with general gameplay. You start with your firewall, and when you drop your firewall, you want to run right through it, and it gives you a huge burst of mana and ward, and it also buffs your Glyph of Domination, or Glyph of Dominion, depending on how long the firewall's been down. So general gameplay loop is you pretty much put the firewall down, you shoot through it with a fire, the flame rush thing. It puts your glyph down. You stand in your glyph. You snipe a few stray mobs with your fireballs to put even more ignites up. You do it again. You put a firewall on their head to debuff them. Put another firewall, run through it, and kind of maintain your mana by spamming fireballs and running through your firewall, etc., etc. And then for an Omega glyph, when you fight like a single boss, you put the thing down on their head for a bit, you count to, I don't know, however long you want to wait, then you run through it, and then you manually drop it. Now, manually dropping it is different because Flame Wall gives like a huge buff multiplier to the next manually cast Dominion, and it has to be a manual cast, not the one that auto procs from your Flame Rush. So that's pretty much the general gameplay. Strengths of this build is that it has extremely fast clear, because you're just kind of flying around with your glyph. The glyph has a really short cooldown because basically it's your Flame Rush cooldown. It's got really wide coverage on big groups. Your fireball is actually pretty decent damage too, so sniping stray is not a big deal. And then when you fly through it and put a manual glyph down, bosses and stuff just like Omega melt. Ward gen can get kind of crazy if you're playing really well. It can get even higher if you go with a Frostclaw variant, but I opted to not do that. So my ward gen's a little lower than it would be, but you can see right here I'm like up 5k right now, just kind of screwing around. If you were using Frostclaw instead of Fireball, it would probably be, I don't know, 6 to 7k instead most of the time. Flying around in Flame Rush is also just kind of fun. And then also another thing that's a really big strength of, I guess, just Runemaster in general, is that Flame Rush itself has like this huge DR built into it. It's base 40%, you get another 18% right here. And then this lets you keep the buff for 45% of the duration you're in Flame Rush. So like, say this enemy is about to like shoot a giant fireball into your face or something, you can just Flame Rush right into it and take it to the face. And you just won't really take much damage because your DR will be so high as long as you catch the hit during like your DR window of Flame Rush, yeah? As far as weaknesses go, it's so tanky when you're standing in your glyph in Flame Rush that sometimes if you like start playing stupid or get like kind of full of yourself, you might all of a sudden just like turn into a piece of glass and explode, yeah? The build can be a little piano-ish. I'm kind of just used to it now, and so like I don't think about it too much, but there is kind of there's a learning curve, you know, and you want to do it, you got to get a certain rhythm down. Standing in your glyph is kind of annoying, but it definitely buffs you a lot, particularly like on an arena type map. You definitely want to like try and stand in your glyph for like the massive ward gen you can see here. Targeting Flame Wall can be kind of hard and takes some practice. So you'll kind of find that as you start playing. Like, see, I missed there, right? You want to put it on their head so they get the debuff. Another weakness is that if you play this build, some other builds after playing this build will feel really slow. And that's particularly true because this build has a built-in, basically permanent haste because of Firewall shooting Runebolts. And Runebolts have a 12% chance on cast to haste you. And so like as long as you keep a Firewall down, you always have haste. So you can see I run pretty fast, right? And you're shooting across the screen with this. So that's actually kind of, I went to another build after this and it felt like I was crawling like a turtle. It was terrible. And then the last weakness is that some of the uniques that you want to use are kind of rare, like particularly these dragon boots and this twisted heart, right? Like these dragon boots took me a long time to get. So, but you don't really need them. They're just like, they just make you a lot stronger. All right, so next we can just go over each one of the skills one at a time and just kind of talk about their uses. So we have Fireball, which, side note, could be Frostclaw. I will go over Frostclaw at the end as like an alternate. So you pretty much go with a machine gun variant. I think it makes it a lot more useful because the main reason you use Fireball is to like pick off stragglers. And if your Fireball is really bad single target, then it's not really going to fulfill that role very well, and it's going to make clearing a little more annoying. Originally, I was going to make Fireball like more of a boss augment, and it does actually do pretty good damage. Like, if you were to just sit here and shoot Fireballs only, and I'm doing the boss dummy right now, you can see that it gets a pretty decent Ignite just by itself, even without the Firewall down. So if I put the Firewall down, all I'm doing is Fireball. And, you know, we're getting up to like 85k. So that's pretty good, right? And another thing about Fireball is it needs to cast 0 mana. And the reason why it wants to cost 0 mana is because you need to be able to proc this to give you free mana. If you don't have the free mana from it, then, you know, you start running into mana problems. And that does happen early on while playing this build. So that's the other reason you get Fireball. Next you have Firewall. Now Firewall, for like general trash, Firewall will like instantly kill anything that's not like a boss. Which is good because it is kind of hard to target, right? Like you have to be pretty precise. But on some maps or any melee type mobs, you can kind of drop it and then run to the other side of it. Mobs will run right through it and explode. And yeah, it's pretty funny. Next we have Runebolt. Now you can see that I don't have Runebolt on my bar at all. The only reason you have Runebolt is so that Firewall can shoot Runebolts. And Runebolt gives you a bit of mana regen, and it also gives you these Runeweave stacks that give you some ward, but it also has this global modifier based on armor shred stacks that are on each target. So that's the reason why we use Runebolt. It gives you some mana back, which you kind of need. It procs haste. And it gives you a global more modifier, which is kind of crazy. I don't even have armor shred on my neck like you would want, because then like you could stack the armor shred up massively with your own fireballs, and then it would be even more effective. So you can imagine how strong this would get if you actually had another more multiplier that I'm missing, right? So we have Glyph of Domination, or Dominion, I always call it Domination. This thing serves a bunch of purposes. One, it's actually your main damage. It stacks Ignite like crazy because of this Ignite frequency stuff. It also gives you like a gazillion resist and ward because of this nonsense over here. And then it's got some really, really powerful more multipliers over here. This thing gives it a cooldown, which sounds crappy, but the thing is that it ignores the cooldown, the Flame Rush proc. So like, the cooldown basically doesn't actually exist other than for the hardcast one. And really the only reason to do the hardcast one is so you can use this Flame Wall buff when you run through it, right? So that cooldown is really only relevant on a boss. That's it. That's the only time it actually matters. And then we have Runic Invocation. Now, this thing is unspec'd. We just leave it on our bar, right? In place of the Runebolt that we don't need. And that's just because you need to have some raw runes for a couple reasons. You need to have a raw rune so that your glyph can consume them for the Omega multiplier right here. You need to have some runes for there's something in here that you need to have them for something. I don't really remember what. next we can talk about Frostclaw and like the variant that you could use. Or I'm just gonna pull it up real quick on a build planner. This is the skill tree that my friend suggested. If you want to go with the Frostclaw variant, you just get like this for mana cost reduction and this for mana cost reduction, which makes it free, right? -6, -3, which puts it to 3, and then you have -3 or 4 depending on which weapon you're using. You want this for like 1,000,000 ward gain. This is like kind of the main reason you'd use Frostclaw over Fireball, so it gives you a ton of ward. And then you go in here, get some cast speed for more ward and generation. And then you go in here to hit this thing to turn it into a shotgun, so it operates the same way that the Fireball machine gun does, which stacks ignites really well. Its ignites are a little stronger than Fireball overall, but it doesn't have as many Mora multipliers in here. It's only got like this 1/8% chance, so it kind of breaks even. It kind of breaks even-ish on damage, but it does do a lot more ward gem. Alright, so next we're going to go ahead and go over the gear that you generally want to use. We can go ahead and start with the easiest thing here, the Calamity. You just use this right at level 7. This thing's really easy to get. It's really common. Getting LP versions is not very hard because its level for legendary affixes or whatever it's called is very low. You definitely want to use this. It's insanely powerful. And yeah, that's just a given. All right, the next thing is the weapon. Now you have two main options for this, and which one you want to use is the subject of some debate, and we've talked about it a lot. You can either wear a Cindersong, or you can wear a Firestarters. Now for leveling, you definitely start with the Firestarters, because that thing is broken as hell at the beginning, right? If you are using Frostclaw, there is more incentive to continue to use a Firestarters. Now, there's an important thing about Cindersong versus Firestarters. If you look at the Cindersong here, you can see that it comes with -3 spell mana cost like most wands, but it also has -3 mana cost for fire spells. So this thing has a -6. And that's really important because it's impossible to get Fireball with the Fire Spray to 0 mana without at least -5, right? Because you only have one more point that can go here to make it cheaper. And it has to be 0 mana or the build's just not really going to function very well. So if you're using Fireball, you kind of need to use Cindersong until or unless you have a Firestarters that has that affix that has at least -3 more mana. And then it'll be -7. So then you can use Firestarter. Now mathematically, I think that the Cindersong is better than the Firestarters until way later. And the reason for that is because this gives you +1 to fire spells, which, unless you have God tier gear, gives you an extra 20% more right here in Vaporizing Realm on Glyph of Dominion, which is obviously massive damage. Otherwise, though, Cindersong or Firestarters has that more modifier for spreading flames, and it can go up to 42%. So if you have a God tier Firestarters, and you also have plus to Glyph of Dominion in a Twisted Heart or the Soulfire relic that you could use, then Firestarters probably does become better. So, you know, it's dealer's choice. If you have like just kind of mediocre gear or you don't know exactly what to do, I would recommend switching to Cindersong at 40 to make your Fireball free and have an extra point in all your skills. Anyways, okay, so next we have Atrophy. This thing is basically just for the penetration at the bottom, right? It's the slow attackers thing, slow duration, slow on hit. That's kind of cool, but you're really just using it for the bottom thing. You don't really have to use these. They're pretty easy to get, though, and you don't really need to have modifiers in them for them to be worth it. But 24% pen is really strong, right? So next we have Dragon Boots. These are hard to get, but you really want these. You really want these. that 30% fire penetration and like the fire trail itself also does a shit ton of damage. And it'll make it so that you only need, I mean, you don't really need any other reduced bonus damage taken from crits if you don't really want to. But if you have at least one more like I have here on the belt, then you're just functionally crit immune, but you still get crit. You get crit, and it just does 0% bonus damage, and then it procs your fire trail. And the fire trail actually does a lot of damage incidentally. Like, it procs your Ignite really fast, so it's pretty good. So last we have this Twisted Heart. Now, you don't have to wear Twisted Heart. The alternative is Soulfire. Now, Soulfire kind of runs into the same thing about Cindersong versus Firestarters. Twisted Heart gives you +1 to elemental spells, which once again gives you an extra 20% more on your Glyph of Dominion. However, if you happen to have a Soulfire that gets +2 or more on Glyph of Dominion inside of it, then maybe you use Soulfire. Because then Soulfire would be way more damage, because it does give you Ignite chance pretty close to what Calamity does. So, but you will have less ward gen, obviously, if you don't use Twisted Heart. So, you know, you decide for yourself. Maybe you don't have a Twisted Heart. This thing is pretty rare from that boss of Reign of Dragons. But that's a choice you can make. Okay, so last we have ward idols. Now, I like having these ward idols because they're very strong. So I kind of just wear this, even though obviously 2 to Static Orb does nothing. This thing has 2 to Static Orb also. It's nothing. But the stable ward being a decent number is very helpful. However, this prefix right here, that Ignite duration, you absolutely want to have 2 of these. Those are functionally more multipliers for your Ignite. The only time that doesn't function as a more multiplier is for something that dies instantly. And if it dies instantly, who gives a shit anyways, right? And then you want fire damage over time or fire damage, right? You could also get ward here instead of fire damage, you know, just depending on what you find. And then this one, you definitely want fire penetrate with Ignite. And then the suffix part is kind of whatever. You get elemental res. Probably just elemental res or fire damage, but, you know, whatever you get with good fire pen is probably fine. And then you just throw resist that you need in here, right? It doesn't. This is just garbage slots. You can't really get another good one with this configuration in here. All right. So as far as gearing, there's a few specific notes with gearing that you're trying to achieve. First and foremost, you want to have 60 int, and this is the reason. You get an extra 24 ward per second if you have 60 int. So you don't need 60 int, but you really want 60 int. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first gearing goal. The second gearing goal, you want to have Frost Wall duration in both of these slots if at all possible. And the main reason for that is this. So you can see that my firewall, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now watch the dot it puts. So you want to have firewall duration specifically so you can ultra omega clap bosses. If you don't care about doing that snapshotting and you're okay with killing bosses a little slower, you can not get this, but I really recommend it. Also, it allows you to take points safely out of this, keep enough fire shred, and put those points in other cool things like free ward on arenas, max out the Runebolt frequency, more mana when you run through it. I put an extra point here just to get 2 seconds of haste right when I run through a firewall, and that's specifically so that I have 2 seconds of haste at the start of a boss fight, so I don't like miss my snapshotting when running through, yeah? Alright, so the next Ignite, there's Ignite possible on head, like you see here, and on chest. I don't have it on chest, which sucks. That is a really, really, really powerful amount of damage when you have Ignite on fire skills on both of these. If I were to have it on chest as a tier 5 like this, my damage would probably go up by like 25 to 35% on this character. And my character already does quite a lot of damage, as you can see. So those affixes are really strong. And then the last general thing, you probably know this if you play this game a lot, but this second affix on this belt, elemental damage over time, is exceptionally strong. It is the most powerful affix in the game because it is the most specific in the game. And it's perfect for this build. So you want to get elemental damage over time on every piece that can get it. You can see I got a high roll tier 7 on this ring. So you want to get that wherever you can, which I think is pretty much, it's pretty much only neck, rings, and belt for this build. I think it's the only place you can get it on this build. You can get it inside of a Firestarter's torch also, which would be insane. If you had a tier 6 or 7 elemental damage over time, it would probably be almost double the value my tier 6 fire is there. Alright, so that's pretty much it for gear. Now we can go through my recommendations for while you're leveling. Please forgive me if I mess this up a little bit. While I was leveling, we were kind of changing things constantly, and it's kind of a balancing act between having enough mana and being able to do what you want to do with the build. It gets complicated, and I'm going to try my best to mention breakpoints that will be useful for you while leveling. So you obviously start with Fireball because you get this at like level 2. You put a Firestarter's torch on if you can. If not, it's fine. Fireball will still be pretty good. I recommend going directly into the machine gun stuff. I prefer this because while it makes your AoE a little less good, it makes your single target way, way, way better. And if you're using a Firestarter's torch particularly, your AoE is not going to have any problems. Firestarter torch hard carries your AoE for till you're like an empowered, right? Like spreading flames early on and up through like the early echo webs is just it's so strong. So once you go through the machine gun thing, right, you'll have 3 here, and then you'll just go all the way down here. As soon as you do that, then you can probably start going into this. Now, while you're doing this, I think that at some point, while you're in the middle of putting points into here, you kind of want to jump over here and get the mana cost down so it becomes 0. I don't quite remember exactly at which point, but just kind of keep your eye on it while you're leveling Fireball, because as soon as you get Fireball to 0 mana, your life is going to become a lot easier suddenly because, well, for obvious reasons, it's 0 mana, and then once it's 0 mana, you can get this, and all your mana woes will be a thing of the past, yeah? Okay, so the next skill you're going to get while leveling is Flame Rush. Now, at the beginning, you're not going to have Flame Rush proccing Glyph of Dominion, right? Like, that's completely unsustainable. Obviously, you don't get Glyph Dominion until way later. You could technically try and proc it right away, but your mana will just not hold up. It will not hold up. It will not work. Your life will be kind of sad. Flame Rush at the beginning does pretty decent damage. When I was leveling, I had went to this speed thing and then went to this Morin area and got this explosion thing. It's pretty okay while leveling, but I don't think that this is the first thing you should do. Had I went back, I think I would have went down into this right away. Now this gives it more damage when you cast a Fireball within 2 seconds before, and it gives you free mana. I think you beeline right into this, and so what you'll end up doing is you'll just be like, Fireball that. And if you just kind of get into that habit, you know, you just tap it and then shoot forward, it'll give you a ton of mana early on, like a ton of mana. You'll spec out of it eventually. Pretty much once Fireball becomes 0 mana, you won't need this anymore, but this will save your sanity early on. So I highly recommend you beeline right into this. You use the next 4 points, which can basically be anywhere. Like, you can put them into the damage at that point if you want to. You can put it into this DSDR thing. You can make this cost less. and be a little faster. You can get some ward with it. That probably would be pretty powerful early on. But for points 9, 10, and 11, you definitely want to prep to be able to proc your glyph. And my guesstimation is that point 12 should be this, because that is, using a different character, that's approximately when you will be able to all of a sudden be able to deal with proccing Glyph of Intention and be able to spec this skill at the same time, yeah? So keep an eye on that while you're leveling. 9, 10, 11 should get you right here. So 9, 10, 11 if you didn't already put points here. And then point 12 should be able to be here. And then once you're able to proc this, don't do that until you're really comfortable with your mana situation regarding Frostwall and Fireball, yeah? After you've gotten this glyph thing, it doesn't really matter what order you do this. This isn't really that important. It does proc some ignites, but it has a pretty low more multiplier, so this is basically just kind of throwaway points. I would probably just get this and the ward thing, because this makes you... This right here, you could honestly only have 2 points in here and it would be just fine, but this node right here is very strong, because you'll fly into somebody's face, and there'll be some death on the ground here, and you'll have another 0.7 seconds to get out of dodge, right? And you'll still be nearly immune to damage because of the DR associated with Flame Rush, yeah? And then once you've filled all this stuff out, your last points should probably just go here because it does something. That's kind of what these are at. It does something. It does some amount of damage. If you have Shred on your neck, this is probably even stronger, because this would apply a lot of armor shreds, which kind of feeds into the Runebolt more multiplier thing. Okay, next we can go ahead and go over Frostwall. First off, you want to go down into Marching Winter so you can get Pyroglass and Brand the Invaders right away. First 3 points, that'll happen like immediately. Now this Flames Unchained, I tried this while I was leveling and it sounded really good, and it makes sense that you would want this when you're doing Fireball, but it's actually just bad. It only procs when something moves through it, so like if you put it on a boss's head, it doesn't proc. And then when it does proc, it doesn't proc correctly and trigger 4 or 5 fireballs. It only does 1. So this is just a waste of 3 points. I highly recommend that you do not use that at all. So then you probably want to max out Biting Limit. You want to keep max in this until you have at least 1 duration / frostbite chance on either your head or your chest. So after that, then you probably want to put some points into Crystals of Protection, because this mana gain is actually really good, especially if you're doing something like you're running through a map and you put it there and then you shoot past it, because it'll actually give you double mana, as it says there, if it's at least 2 meters away from you. So probably want to put some points into this as you level, and then as soon as you're able to spec Runebolt, you want to go into here and get Runebolt going, and then you'll get even more mana, right? Way later, then you're going to want to get this Aspirant's Arrival. This Aspirant's Arrival node is really only useful for bosses. This is the thing that turns Glyph of Dominion into a monster boss killer. You can see here it makes it cheaper, which is kind of nice, but more importantly, you get 30% of a multiplier per second the wall is active. So it starts as a 6-second, but then when you have duration, if you had 2 tier 5s, it would be, I think, like 60% duration. So total you'd have about 70% duration, which makes it about a 9 or 10 second wall, right? So mine's probably more like 11. So we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah. When you do remove the points from this because you have the duration and frostbite chance, then I would suggest maxing this one out along with this. Maxing this out is mostly like a quality of life thing. Getting a lot of mana when you run through your flame wall is really nice. Now this point, I put in as the very last point. What this does is that when you do this snapshotting thing on bosses, it ensures that you have haste while you're running up to them after they trigger, so you won't run out of time on the buff that this gives you, because I think it's only 5 seconds. So you have 5 seconds after you run through it to manually drop your glyph, yeah? Alright, so next we have Glyph of Dominion. Now, me and my friend that were going through this build went through a lot of iterations on the best way to do this. And then I was watching a different video and I realized that this path is just the play. This path makes your glyph absolutely ridiculous. But you do have some options here. The first thing you want to do, though, is go up here. 100%. Because this is like the whole reason you have this, right? You go here, you fill this whole thing out, and as soon as you start getting this, you're going to see your Glyph of Dominion just absolutely slap everything. It's going to be absolutely crazy. This thing just like incinerates everything. Even on like 200 corruption maps, unless it's a really big mob, it just basically dies instantly to your glyph. It's actually kind of insane. Now, after you fill in this part, you have a choice to make. You can either start going down here for like insane defense, or you can go over here for some quality of life. You're gonna run into some issues with the duration of it if you don't have this, but this is an insane amount of defense, so you're kind of just gonna have to feel it out as you play. You probably don't need this kind of offense early on, but if you do have it, you're gonna actually insta-clap like everything. So I don't know. The order I did this was just totally different, because we tried going up here with the double glyph thing. Do not recommend this. It sounds good, but play style wise and functionally and mathematically, I think this is just fail. Alright, so last we have Runebolt. Now, I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but Runebolt serves like two main purposes. One, it gives you perma haste, which is amazing. Permanent 30% more movement speed is just incredible in this game. It's actually just insane. The other purpose that it serves, gives you a bunch of mana back for free, because it's just attached to your flame wall. You never push it. So it's just kind of shooting random crap. It gives you permanent haste, it gives you mana. And then as a final thing, you want it to shred armor for you because of this global modifier for armor shred. These points would probably not be necessary at all if you had armor shred on your neck. But for me, I need it because I don't have armor shred on my neck. You could probably put these 5 points elsewhere. If you had armor shred on your neck, you could fill out this overcharge so that it hits more enemies and does a little bit more damage. You could max out the move speed thing. You could actually make it do a little bit more damage. That's about all the things that would matter. Alright, so that's it for skills. Next, we can just kind of go through the passives. These are, I don't know, these are probably kind of obvious to people that have played this, but we'll go through it. Alright, so you just start with int. You just go 8 int. You put these 2 points in because you kind of need it to get to 10. You go 5 in here for cast speed, because cast speed. And then you get 5 into Warden. And then you stop here. You stop here because these aren't that important. They're just kind of like filling out the tree. You do this later. You jump into Runemaster. You start here. Now, this thing is never going to proc early on, but it still gives you cast speed, which is really good, right? So whatever. You go 5 into here. Now, at this point, you do have a decision. You could get more damage if you don't really care about getting the ward per second early on, which, you know, maybe early this would be better, but you'd have to put 3 in here first. So you could take only 2 in here and then go here to get some DR and get some more damage, or you can just go here and get a million ward and int and then fill this out. While you're leveling, this isn't really very good, but this is good sort of like in the mid game where you don't have dragon boots equipped, but you're also doing echoes with crit modifiers, yeah? Because you want this becomes a lot more useful. So you might use this probably not early, but maybe in the mid game until you have dragon boots, yeah? Because the crit reduction, yeah, it's strong. Then you have another choice once you get up here. You can either get more defense or you can get more boss damage. Both of these is quite good. Take your pick. So now once you get like around here, actually I guess once you get 5 points into this, you kind of have a choice to make because that'll unlock Glyph of Dominion. You can either continue on here, or what I would recommend is that once you've maxed this out at 8, so you get the CDR on your Flame Rush, I would jump over to Sork. And this isn't really going to feel all that good at first, but you really, really need to get this. This is very strong, and this is also pretty decently strong. So, you know, you make your choice. You could fill this kind of stuff out, but I would really recommend jumping over to Sork. Probably right as you get 8 points into this. So you're going to unlock Glyph of Dominion, and then it'll be 3 more points, and then you jump to Sork and fill this out. You know, you get the cast speed, you get some armor, which is pretty good defense, actually. And you pretty much just have to do this. Like, this is like the only configuration that really makes much sense. This has some value, but not a lot compared to this or this, so... And then you go back into Runemaster. Now, the final configuration of these passives are kind of up for debate. If you're using Frostclaw, these points are insanely powerful. But if you're using Fireball, they're not really that powerful. Yeah? These points, if you're using a Cindersong, are totally pointless, because crit multiplier when you're in Ignite build is total trash. If you're using a Scepter, these points are pretty good, you know, defensively. So that's another option. These points are misleading. The bottom part, just ignore the bottom part. Just read the top part. It's a 12% more modifier. It's fine, right? The bottom part doesn't work. Who cares? Same with this one. Don't read the bottom part. It's fine. You get 10% more damage to branded enemies. It's another multiplier. And you brand with your Frost Wall. And that's pretty much it for passives. And now I will show you a few clips of me playing in various types of map situations so you can see what it's actually like. Thanks, everybody. Oh my god, I'm bad. She jebaited me. I thought she was gonna stop, like, farther forward. And we got the flower monsters again to screw with our safety place. Just walk through the wall, man. Stop shooting poison at me. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Just walk right through it. I promise it will be painless. You'll be dead instantly. It's fine. Would have been real hot. Yeah, tier 7 Ignite on this build would have been crazy. I'd be really happy if I could get a neck that's like the same as what I'm wearing, but just has frailty sealed. Even like a tier 2 frailty would be fine. That would be a crazy amount of defense for this build. Really want frailty. Dude, if we had frailty on this build, we'd be like invulnerable to damage while in fireball form. We'd have so many DRs. Look at all this poison you put on the ground, man. Digital to analog converter. Oh. So what I said is technically what it is in this case. But only coincidentally. Only coincidentally. Not actually what it is. That is a lot of freeze. So much freeze. Many cold. All your freeze are belong to us. A lot of giant slammy turtle punch ball guys. Whoa. That was kind of scary. They keep rezzing. I guess those turtles just like have the res effects more than most monsters. That's a lot of stun. That's an unfortunate tier 7 roll, let me tell you. Hey, that's a good affix. I think that was probably a tier 4 version of it, I think. I can be like that. Oh, we're almost there. We're there, we did it. We're the best players. I can be like that. Interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh no. Mistakes were made. See you later, bro. We be seeing ya. Am I still so far down? There's so much fire. Why is there so much fire, though? Danger birds. Danger birds and their shiny circles. These guys don't die from a fireball cast anymore. He does that every time. Oh, I'm gonna die. Oh. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good enough. Oh, that was perfect. Good night. He didn't die? Seriously? There you go.